which will try and present the work of the dynamic coalitions. We have had since the beginning of the IGF, actually, but in the last 9 IGFs, we didn't have this opportunity to have this direct interaction with the work and the results or the outcomes of the work of the dynamic coalitions. And this is an important opportunity we have to have a better interaction with them, to hear what they are doing, and to think about maybe other dynamic coalitions that might wish to be formed and present their outcomes in the future. So I will pass on the ball to the moderators to really begin the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much for introducing us. Just a few words before we start. The IGF has a long tradition of being experimental and trying out new formats to improve the discussion, integrate new issues and new people. And this session now continues this tradition. And we hope to make progress with this format on 2 challenges. One concerns the integration of dynamic coalitions, which for a long time rather played a marginal role in the IGF. And the other issue concerns a long-term question, and that is the outcome orientation of the IGF. Quite a sensitive issue. Lots of reports have noticed that the IGF is very good at addressing issues and discussing them, but it's not often clear what follows from that. So we want to tackle these 2 issues and perhaps combine them. And one has to say it hasn't been easy to prepare this session. We've been discussing the modes of doing this until the very last minute. And I will now hand over to our 2 co-facilitators for explaining the rules of the session today and that of tomorrow morning. The co-facilitators are Avri Doria and Markus Kummer, 2 old hands when it comes to IGF procedures.
Thank you, Avri Doria. So, this is a pilot project, as Jeanette said. And the pilot project is, how do we take the work, the good work that these dynamic coalitions have been doing. Now, the dynamic coalitions are all bottom-up organizations. They've all sort of come to their methods and their methodologies for coming to agreement on things on their own over the years. And we've gotten to the point now where we've been meeting with these dynamic coalitions over, I guess it's the last 6 months or so, to figure out how to move beyond just the dynamic coalitions doing their own work. As Jeanette said, basically, is there a way to make the work of the dynamic coalitions more part of the IGF process? And can we find a way to take the work that they've done and sort of declare that it is output from the IGF? Now, at the moment, we're not quite sure how to do that, and we're going to continue talking about that. The Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group has been talking about this process over the year and is going to continue talking about it. What we're doing this time is we've taken one full session and divided it into 2 halves. At this half, each of a number of the dynamic coalitions, those who believe they have output that's ready for further consideration, and one that has strong output but believes it needs another year's work before it's ready to ask for a certain amount of feedback from the community. The point is, today, each of them will be given 7 minutes to present a paper that they wrote. Those papers are all online and all open to comment. We'll present that, and then at tomorrow's meeting, we will have most of the time dedicated to discussing those works and to see whether any have reached a point where the community feels in its feedback that, yes, this is stuff that we really want to put out and think, or the feedback maybe it needs more work, it's something that we like the progress that's been made, and so we're really going to try and gauge the moderators and the chair. So we'll try to gauge to what degree has this work reached a point where it might be considered for IGF output, but we're still really working on that problem. Now, another part of this is that we're, within this pilot experiment, we're trying an additional experiment with rating sheets. And rating sheets are something that Jeremy will explain once I finish. They're basically a set of statements. We asked between 5 and 10 statements related to the papers. These will be posted somewhere, and the community, all of you, will be able to indicate the degree to which you agree, don't agree, are confused by, add your own comments, to basically get some more feedback. Now, this feedback is meant for the dynamic coalitions. The extent to which we may use it in further discussions is still very open. We need to see how the experiment works. So with that, I'll basically ask Jeremy to, I'll pass it off to my co-facilitator, my senior co-facilitator, to say a couple extra words. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus Kummer speaking for the record. Yes, let me also put it, and as Avri rightly said, the dynamic coalitions have been with us since the very beginning. They were a kind of compromise. Some groups wanted to establish proper formal working groups, and others were opposed to that as it looked too much like a proper sort of institution, and the IGF was meant to be a platform for dialogue, and at that time they felt it would be inappropriate. So what happened is they evolved kind of in the margins of the IGF. Some of them went away again, disappeared, while some others stayed on and actually produced some serious work. But the work was never brought back to the mainstream of the IGF community. And within the IGF, 2 years ago, we sort of thought it was time to take a step further and introduced the best practice forums as part of intersessional work. And this year, we came up with another thematic track for intersectional work, and in addition it was decided to bring in the dynamic coalitions as a third track of intersessional work. But they are distinct clearly from the best practice forums, as their themes were self-chosen, bottom-up, and they were never discussed by the multi-stakeholder advisory group or approved by anybody. They were self-chosen themes. There were only a very basic set of conditions imposed of them, such as they need to have a website, they need to have a mailing list. And in the process, we discovered that each of these dynamic coalitions has different rules, different internal procedures, but it was then decided we would not change the rules in mid-game, and we let them get on with that. That was a decision taken at the Paris meeting of the MAG in early September. So where we are now is we have dynamic coalitions. They all have different rules and procedures, internal procedures, and we have to accept that and respect that. But the idea is also that after this session there will be a stock taking, and with the objective of moving towards some common baseline, some common rules, some common procedures. That will be a process that will not happen overnight. That will be part of a big discussion. But for the IGF, I think it is an important moment. It can show that we have a mechanism in place where we can do serious intersessional work, and that also up to now the dynamic coalitions had utter freedom and could kind of use the IGF label, but when moving forward, I think it will also be necessary to impose certain obligations and responsibilities that go with using the IGF label. But as Avri said, we are in an experimental phase. This is what we are doing today and tomorrow is a pilot project, and then at the end of tomorrow's half of the session we can decide whether or not it was a pilot project that deserves to be continued or in what way that would need to be corrected. But that will not be part of tomorrow's session. That will be taken up later by the multi-stakeholder advisory group and taking stock of this meeting. And with this, back to our moderators.
Thank you, Marcus. My name is Rachel Pollock-Ishu. I am a newcomer to the IGF and the Dynamic Coalitions, but very happy to be here today. I'd like to just start by explaining the order, a bit more of today's discussion. First, we'll hear from Jeremy Malcolm from the Electronic Frontier Foundation, who will speak for 5 minutes about the idea rating sheets and describe the process online and on paper available at the back of the room. After that, we will hear from each of the dynamic coalitions, who can speak for a maximum of 7 minutes. And to have complete fairness in the order, we're going to pull names from this box to determine the order. So now I hand the floor over to Jeremy. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So, as Avri and Marcus explained, we were all in agreement on the kind of thing that we wanted to accomplish to bring the outputs of the dynamic coalitions to the IGF as a whole, but we weren't sure about how to actually go about that. So I suggested we use a methodology called idea rating sheets, and that's the experiment that we're going with for this year. So I'm going to see if this clicker works. Yes. So what are idea rating sheets? Can we please have the presentation on the main screen? Apparently not. Okay. Something's happening. There we go. So idea rating sheets are a simple methodology that you can use in face-to-face meetings to gather feedback on ideas, and you can also use it to collect or to generate ideas as well. We're only going to be using it for generating feedback on the ideas because we've already produced the ideas in the dynamic coalitions themselves. So we have pre-written the ideas on the sheets. You don't need to write the ideas on there. All you need to do is to put your feedback on those sheets. Here is an example of an idea rating sheet. Net access should be financed by a tax on domain names. That's a fictional idea, and I'm not suggesting that's a good one. But on this sheet, it's showing strong agreement for some reason. And so what happens is that you fill in one of those dots, depending on whether you strongly agree, you're neutral, you disagree, you strongly disagree, or you may be confused by the statement. You may not even understand it. When you fill in a dot, you also sign your name. This is not meant to be We have different colours of pens. There are those colours. You don't have to memorise those because they've also got labels on them. I've put the labels to correspond with what you see there. And where are these sheets? They're at the back left corner, from my perspective, of the room. And they're laid out on tables there. There is a sign for each dynamic coalition, and then there are a series of sheets, one sheet for each idea that dynamic coalition has put forward. We have 7 dynamic coalitions that have made idea rating sheets. Of those, 6 of them are laid out on the tables. There is one which we couldn't fit onto the tables because there were 21 idea rating sheet, which should be pretty self-explanatory. You just move the slider from left to strongly, which is strongly disagree, to right for strongly agree. And of course, only do one, don't vote twice. Either use the paper sheets or use the online sheets. I would recommend, given that we're going to be finishing this session at 6, you may want to take the time to complete the idea rating sheets during an interval of this meeting when you're not interested in what else is going on. Sorry, that came across the wrong way.
You
What I
should
mean
be
is, if
interested
you
in
find
all
yourself-
of the session.
If you find yourself with a free moment, then feel free to go to the back to complete the sheets. If not, then use the online version. Because we are going to be coming back tomorrow morning to collect up the sheets, and there probably won't be a lot of time. Yeah, we'll complete the sheet. We'll capture the completed sheets tomorrow early, and we'll try and produce a brief summary about which statements received really strong approval and which ones didn't. And for the dynamic coalitions who wish to have that feedback referred to in the session tomorrow, then you'll be able to avail yourself of that. As I said, yeah, reporting back session tomorrow, where we get feedback from the participants here. We can also get feedback directly from those sheets to get a
30
rough
seconds,
idea.
please.
Sure. I think I'm done. Yeah, I am done. So that's it. And probably not time for questions, but individually, I'm available. Thank you.
You have 18 seconds, Brad.
Great. We're running a little bit short on time, as I think we have 9 dynamic coalitions here today to speak. So we'll ask each of them to limit your remarks to 7 minutes. If we could please set the timer for 7 minutes, perfect. And we'll start by pulling out of a hat. Let's see. We have the Dynamic Coalition on Public Access in Libraries, and I believe that is Christina de Castel. I give the floor to you.
Thank you, Rachel. The Dynamic Coalition on Public Access in Libraries was founded 4 years ago and includes about 140 participants from all IGF stakeholder groups. We developed the statement we are presenting today over 2015, and it builds on prior efforts to discuss the role of libraries in access to information both within and beyond the IGF at national, regional, and international levels. Your feedback on the principles on public access in libraries will help us to continue to underline the critical role of libraries in ensuring access to information, both in the WSIS Plus 10 review and in the national development plans that will follow the Sustainable Development Goals defined in the UN 2030 agenda. Over the past few days, we've been hearing that achieving access to information requires more than investment in technology infrastructure. It requires a policy environment that supports governments and other stakeholders in publishing information online and ensuring it is accessible, an environment that ensures individuals have the ability to find and use the information provided via the internet, and an environment that ensures that communities have the capacity and incentives to publish local content online. Hundreds of millions of people use the internet through shared connections and through providers of public access such as libraries. Libraries are trusted, safe institutions that already exist in many developing countries. They include skilled and qualified library staff who offer the public support on technology and training on information and media literacy. Libraries provide an avenue to achieve ubiquitous public access to the internet and to ensure that people have the skills they need to access information through technology. So, the members of the Dynamic Coalition on Public Access in Libraries have agreed to the following principles. Infrastructure. Libraries should be recognized as a vehicle to ensure universal access to the internet. Libraries should be used to initiate universal and affordable infrastructure in developing countries and underserved communities in developed countries. Where libraries do not exist, information and documentation centers should be recognized as a vehicle for ensuring universal access. Policy. Policies and legislation should create an enabling environment for universal access to information by supporting the role of libraries in providing public access to ICTs, internet connectivity, and technology training. Copyright. National and international copyright frameworks should balance the public interest in accessing information with the rights of authors, artists, and publishers by ensuring provisions for libraries and archives to provide public access to the world's knowledge in all formats. Accessibility. All people, irrespective of gender, age, capacity, race, or ethnicity, should have access to information through ICTs and the skills needed to participate fully in society. Privacy. Individuals have the right to privacy when they seek information using the internet. Internet users in public venues such as libraries must not be subject to surveillance of their activities. Skills development. Libraries should be supported in their role of offering training and skills development in using technology, media, and information literacy so that people can access the information and services that they need. open access content. Through providing technology and internet access, libraries offer and promote access to free online content that supports education and development, complementing access to commercial content through online subscription resources. And local content. Through providing technology and offering support, libraries have the capacity to promote and enable the creation of local content and to ensure its preservation. Libraries should be supported in using and facilitating access to open data and open access solutions, and libraries' role in providing access to government information and services should be recognized. The next step of the Dynamic Coalition on public access in libraries is to identify concrete actions that IGF stakeholders can take to further the implementation of these principles. We hope that you would like to join in developing these recommendations by participating in the Dynamic Coalition on Public Access in Libraries and continuing this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and also for keeping your remarks concise. Okay, we'll move on to the next speaker, which is the Dynamic Coalition on Platform Responsibility. I therefore call on Nicolo Zengales from Tilburg University. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If you could please reset the clock to 7 minutes.
The Dynamic Coalition on Platform Responsibility is pleased to present the work developed over the course of the last year throughout a dedicated mailing list in a participatory and multi-stakeholder fashion. These recommendations are grounded upon the tripartite framework developed by the UN Special Rapporteur for Business and Human Rights, according to which governments have a duty to protect human rights, corporations have the responsibility to respect human rights, and they both have a joint duty to offer an effective remedy. The aim of this recommendation is to provide guidance on what constitutes responsible conduct by online platforms in the protection of human rights of their users, in particular, privacy, freedom of expression, and due process. This guidance has been developed by reference to the Council of Europe's Guide on Human Rights for Internet Users and various international human rights documents. Through this recommendation, we not only identified minimum standards for the respect of human rights by platform operators, which we refer to as standards that shall be met, but also best practices, which we refer to as recommended or that should be followed for the most responsible adherence to human rights principles in the drafting of terms of service of these online platforms. One of the issues that we had to deal with in developing this recommendation is the conflicts that there may be between international human rights law and national laws which might implement international standards somewhat differently. This recommendation recognizes the need for companies to submit to national laws, but only to the extent that these are not manifestly illegitimate. So we define laws as procedurally legitimate when they are enacted on the basis of a democratic process. And in order to be substantively legitimate, these laws must respond to a pressing social need and, having regard to their impact, being proportional to their aim pursued. So the first principle that I mentioned is due process. Due process in this recommendation is defined as clarity and predictability of the substantive law, the right to an effective remedy against any human rights violation, and the right to be heard before any potentially adverse decision is taken regarding oneself. In this respect, the recommendations require meaningful notice to be provided to user before the amendment and termination of contracts, specifically given the impact that this can have on the rights of individuals. It also recommends that platforms make termination of accounts possible only upon repeated violation of terms of service or on the basis of court order. And regarding adjudication of disputes, it suggests that platforms should offer a quick dispute resolution system, but not as a substitute of regular court proceedings, only as a complement to that. In particular, it requires platforms not to request waiver of class action rights for their users. With regard to freedom of expression,
commend these dynamic coalitions on the work that they have done. However, these other issues are so fundamental that they sometimes have the ability to overwhelm the core reasons why the internet works, how it works. So among the internet core values, the following are the most significant ones: a single domain name system, permissionless innovation, open, borderless, user-centric, end-to-end, interoperable, robust and reliable. Some of these values have been eroded or broken over the years. For example, the end-to-end nature of the internet was broken when network address translation was used to ease the scarcity of IPv4 addresses. The reason was technical, not political. But on this occasion, the internet continues to evolve technologically, and now that we're seeing the introduction of IPv6, this core value will actually be restored ultimately. As the internet evolves, new challenges have appeared, from the delivery of zero-rating services, we've seen that in the previous session, to selective bandwidth capping, carrier-grade network address translation, port blocking, content filtering, and deep packet inspection. These are serious threats to core internet values. Our session at this year's IGF, entitled Core Internet Values as a Reference Standard for Internet Policy, showcased an excellent exchange of views based on the one-pager which the Coalition has put online as its contribution to the IGF process. Just one page, so please comment on it. There are already a lot of comments. We need a lot of input on this. We had participants including Kathy Brown, CEO of the Internet Society, Paul Wilson, Director General of APNIC, the Regional Internet Registry from the Asia Pacific region, Carlton Samuels from the University of West Indies, and Mark Covell from the UK Government's Department of Culture, Media and Sports. We discussed the meeting of a free internet, zero-rating services, internet as a dumb technology providing end-to-end services, fragmentation, and finally the possibility of drafting a document which stakeholders, including large internet organizations, civil society, and governments, could actually commit to, thus ensuring that the future internet does not deviate from these core internet values. As was explained by the government sector panelist, that this would be unlikely, as it would turn any point into an interstate negotiation. Other panelists agreed of that, and the way forward was seen to actually have a best practices document, but no signature at the end of the day. So plans for the forthcoming year are therefore to consolidate the core values into a dynamic living document. And why dynamic? Because the internet itself is dynamic, and the moment you print something, it risks becoming obsolete. By sustaining the ongoing discussion of each year's threats to the core internet values, the Coalition aims to keep as dynamic and as up-to-date as the internet's evolution. Work will continue on our mailing list, and everyone is invited to join. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivier, for the overview of the history and core dynamic values of the internet. The next speaker will be from the Dynamic Coalition on Network Neutrality, Luca Belli. I give you 7 minutes. If we could please reset the clock. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Good morning to everyone. So the document that will be presented this year as to request feedback is not the first outcome of the Dynamic Coalition on Neutrality. Actually, the Dynamic Coalition on Neutrality was created in 2013 to produce some concrete outcomes. So one of the main goals was to produce a model framework on net neutrality, and then to create, to trigger some sort of dialogue and debate on net neutrality, a global debate, and to try to enshrine the tendencies of this debate in annual reports that have been published every year and discussed at every IGF since 2013. So the first, as I was saying, the first outcome was this model framework on net neutrality, and it has the purpose of the model framework was to provide some regulatory indications on how to regulate net neutrality. The process that we have decided to use to produce this model framework was a transposition of the IETF working group process. So we decided to open a mailing list, a public mailing list, where everyone could share information but also cooperate in the elaboration of this document. And the result has been presented in 2013 at the IGF in Bali. It has played an inspirational role because both the Council of Europe has used it as a working material to elaborate a recommendation on net neutrality, and also some committees of the European Parliament have used it as a sort of inspiration to amend the initial proposal of the Commission on the Connected Continent regulation. But last year at the IGF in Istanbul was quite clear that the general impression was that something more was needed to consider it an IGF outcome. So that was very clear in the IGF chair summary, that suggested the need for a validation process to consider this an outcome of the IGF. And so we decided to use again the IETF, to transpose again the IETF process, so to use the last call process that is used by the IETF to go from an internet draft to a request for comment, allowing all the participants to further comment and to refine the document. So also we have decided not to have a regulatory model, but a policy statement, a principle statement. And the result is that we shortened the document and modified it. We had a very intense consultation period during 6 months, involving a wide range of stakeholders. And so in the first part, which corresponds to the first idea rating sheet is the preamble that sets the basic fundamental element of net neutrality, and also the aspiration. So the internet should be open, secure, and accessible to all people. Net neutrality plays an instrumental role in preserving internet openness, fostering the enjoyment of human rights, and promoting competition and equality of opportunity. Safeguard the generative peer-to-peer nature of the internet, and spreading the benefits of the internet to all people. The third part of the preamble is that managing internet traffic in transparent and non-discriminatory manner, compatible with the net neutrality principles, serve the interest of the public by preserving a level playing field with minimal barriers to entry, and by providing equal opportunity for the intervention and development of new applications, services, and business models.
Can you read a bit slowly, otherwise it's difficult to follow.
It was just to stay in the 7 minutes.
Yeah, but that is a bad compromise.
Okay, yes, I apologize. I will, yeah, it's true. So the third point is that, and that has been suggested very intensely, particularly by private sector participants to the consultation, is that competition among broadband networks, technologies, and all players of the internet ecosystem is essential to ensure the openness of the internet. Last point of the preamble, all individuals and stakeholders should have the possibility to participate to the elaboration of any net neutrality regulatory instrument. So then, after having set these fundamental elements, we define some safeguards, and we explicitly state that net neutrality regulatory instruments should, at a minimum, provide the following safeguards. First, we define the principle of net neutrality. Net neutrality is the principle according to which internet traffic is treated without unreasonable discrimination, restriction, or interference, regardless of its sender, recipient, or type of content. The previous definition in the model framework didn't have the qualification unreasonable. This has been added due to the debate that we had, and we felt the need to introduce some flexibilities. The private sector participant particularly felt to this need, and we felt that if the unreasonable, that is quite fuzzy concept, had to be added, we should have defined what was reasonable traffic management. So reasonable traffic management is defined immediately after, and the paragraph states that internet service providers should act in accordance with the net neutrality principle, and any deviation from this principle may be considered as reasonable traffic management as long as it is necessary and proportionate to preserve the network security and integrity, which is quite agreed by any stakeholders, to mitigate the effect of temporary and exceptional congestion, primarily by means of protocol agnostic measures, so by non-discriminatory measures, But when these measures do not prove practicable, so they are not efficient, by means of protocol-specific measures. And we have to use the term protocol agnostic or protocol specific to make sure that we were speaking about an entire category of service, not specific application or competing application. And also the third exception, which is also in the Marco Civil here and is also suggested by our Indian participants, is to prioritize emergency services in the case of unforeseeable circumstances or force majeure, meaning that...
Sorry, if you could try to wrap up in the next 30 seconds, the clock is off. Thanks.
Oh, I thought they had 2 minutes.
It started 2 minutes late.
Okay, I will wrap up in a couple of words. So then we added the law enforcement as a separate principle, knowing that not considering it as reasonable traffic management, but acceptable traffic management due to the overblocking problems that can lead to. Transparent obligations, meaning that operators should provide meaningful information on the conditions of the internet access and on the speeds. Then to go very fast, the last 2 points are privacy, and someone could wonder why privacy is here. Well, because several traffic management practices need a prior deep packet inspection, a prior monitoring, and therefore we've stated that all internet players should comply.
Thank you.
And sorry, the last point is.
Anyway, really, you need to stop.
Just say that there is also implementation. Thank you for that.
Yes, thank you. Next, we will hear from the Dynamic Coalition on Gender and Internet Governance with Vishkaka Datta from Point of View, India. And if the timekeepers, please, could you start the clock at 7 minutes now? That would be very helpful. Bye.
Great, thank you very much. The Dynamic Coalition on Gender and Internet Governance, or DC-GIG as we refer to it in short form, started many years back in 2008. I was not part of the IGF deliberations at that point, but the reason it started is out of a fundamental belief that gender cannot be seen as an add-on or an extra or something that comes at the peripheries of internet governance, but as something that is actually fundamental and integral to internet governance, in the sense that no one gender should be able to articulate, define, or identify internet governance. Rather, internet governance must be shaped, defined, and articulated by different genders. Now, when it started in 2008, the term that was used for gender was actually, even though it was called the Dynamic Coalition on Gender and Internet Governance, what we were talking about was really women. And if you look at the documents, you'll see that the word women actually predominates. And the main mechanism that was used to see whether women at that time played a critical role in internet governance is a mechanism that is called the gender report cards. Very briefly, what the gender report cards represent is that in every global IGF workshop, as part of the report back, the workshop moderator is required to report back on diversity considerations. For instance, there are specific questions around how many women and men are there on the panel, how many women and men are there as moderators, as participants, how many times gender is mentioned, and so on. This is baked into the IGF process. So this was thought to be a really good way to see whether we were coming closer to our aspiration of gender parity, defined in those days very much in the women and men binary sense. Moving forward to 2015, we had a really good meeting today, and you'll see some of this in the idea rating sheets, and we want to make a series of propositions. One is that we would really like to expand the definition of gender to include more gender identities. We would like to include trans people, that's trans men, trans women. We would like to include people who identify themselves as intersex. And we actually had a very interesting discussion about how would we do this. We don't really want to add another column where we start ticking off trans, etc. in the workshop reports. But we would like to see whether it's possible for the IGF registration process to either add another column or to find a way to allow people to self-identify across genders beyond men and women. The second important thing that we looked at today is we looked at how we could add a qualitative dimension to the discussions around gender parity, while the gender report cards help us look at how many women there are in the room in terms of numbers. Sometimes it's not possible to measure significance through numbers. For example, we know that the findings are showing very clearly that the numbers of women as moderators, panelists, participants is going up. But they are going up more in the sub-theme on internet and human rights. Whereas what we really want is for gender issues to be sort of cross-cutting issues and to be there in many more sessions. So this is something that we are also looking at, how do we actually accomplish this. And the third thing that came up, which may be a little new, is there were certain cases reported this morning, and this is not in our report because it was only reported this morning at the Gender Dynamic Coalition. There were mentions of cases of sexual harassment that women have faced either at the regional IGFs or online during IGF governance processes or at the global IGF. I am not at liberty to actually describe specific cases right now, but let me just say that there weren't numerically, there were a few cases that were mentioned, but one of the arguments that was made at the Gender Dynamic Coalition is that if we are talking about getting more women to participate and, empowering women and helping women achieve their rights through the internet, etc., well, women have to feel comfortable in this space. And one of the things that we really need to think about, since a few of these have now been voiced, is do we want to have friendly space policies? Do we want to include something around sexual harassment in the code of conduct? This was again something that was enthusiastically endorsed by the Dynamic Coalition on Gender meeting this morning, and this is something that we would really like to have feedback on. So in conclusion, we have 5 ideas that we've put up on the rating sheets. I've sort of given you a broad view of these. These are specifically broken down, and we would very, very much like comment from everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Vishaka. We'd just like to reiterate that this work idea rating sheet in particular is very clear, and I encourage everyone to take a look at a model perhaps for the future. We have 2 speakers left. One is next will be the Dynamic Coalition on Internet Rights and Principles. We have 2 speakers. It will be Hanan Boujemi from Hibos and Marianne Franklin from Goldsmith, but time is still limited to 7 minutes. I'd like to add that the idea rating sheet is available online only in this case. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Marianne Franklin, and I'm sharing this presentation with Hanan Boujemi. So we won't be taking 14 minutes, we'll be taking 3.5 minutes each. The Dynamic Coalition for Internet Rights and Principles was established at the 2008 Hyderabad IGF. The IRPC, as we call it, has 2 elected co-chairs and an elected steering committee. The listserv currently has 344 members. In this main session, we would like to present the IRPC Charter of Human Rights and Principles for the Internet as one of the IGF outputs. I'm putting it here so the camera can pick it under the subtitling. The IRPC Charter of Human Rights and Principles for the Internet and our 10 Internet Rights and Principles were drafted and released into the public domain in 2010 and 11. The 21 articles of the IRPC Charter articulate the interconnections between international human rights law and norms, Internet design, access and use, and Internet governance processes. The objectives of this charter are to provide, first of all, a shared reference point for dialogue and cooperation between different stakeholder priorities in the Internet governance domain. Secondly, to provide an authoritative document for framing policy decisions and emerging rights-based norms for the online environment. And thirdly, provide a policy-making and advocacy tool for governments, businesses, and civil society groups. So how does this work? You can take a look, but just to run it down very briefly, it articulates fundamental rights and freedoms under international law for the online environment. First of all, as rights that we know as hard law, and also as principles, soft law. For instance, existing rights such as Article 8, the right to privacy, and aspirational forms of rights, so-called soft law, for instance, our very first article, right to access to the internet. This charter has been gaining in stature and recognition since its launch in 2011 at the European Dialogue on Internet Governance in Belgrade. Our 10 Internet rights and principles, currently in 25 languages, were derived from the full charter and have been an effective form of outreach and awareness raising at both the grassroots and global level.
It's my turn. Hi everyone, my name is Hanan Mujami and I work for HIVOS. So the full charter has been made available in several world languages through the efforts of committed legal experts and lawyers from all around the world. At the moment, the RPC charter booklet contains a full charter and 10 principles. It's currently available in 8 languages, initiated and achieved by dedicated teams on the ground. So we have the English version, which is the original, Arabic, German, Turkish, Spanish, Farsi, Mandarin, and the Brazilian Portuguese, which was launched this morning at the IGF in João Pessoa. So the English edition is currently in its 4th copy, so it's the 4th edition, and we launched the Brazilian copy today, as I said earlier. So we would like to thank all the translators who contributed in this work, which is outreaching millions of people all around the world. So why these efforts are so important? It's because there are cooperative efforts to translate the charter and also the booklet to engage and mobilize language communities for outreach and implementation at the local level.
So, we have so far 26 endorsements from a range of stakeholders, and we have 14,043 signatures in support of the work thanks to the HIVOS IG Munich Click Rights campaign. We would like to highlight just briefly some milestones. We have 3 minutes. We will cut those and move to the last bit if we need to. Points we would like to underscore is the way the Charter has been recognised in official reports. For instance, the European Agency for Fundamental Rights in the 2013 Chilean Internet and Human Rights Report, as we have already pointed out, is starting to be implemented through its translations at the local level. A close partner initiative, and an important one, is the Council of Europe's Guide to Human Rights for Internet Users, which has just been adopted in 2014. We've also seen it adopted at the national level, for instance, at the Aotearoa New Zealand Green Party's Internet Rights and Freedoms Bill, and the Italian Declaration of Internet Rights, which we've been talking about today, has also been inspired by the Charter, the Marco Civil, and also the Net Mundial Outcome Document. So there are more details online on these initiatives. What we would like to stress at this point is that this is a living document, and this underscores its value as an authoritative framework and an advocacy tool at the same time. We'd just like to note that we have undergraduate students participating in the IGF consultative process, and they have been providing substantive feedback on all the DC, or many of the DC's outputs, and we welcome you all. We invite you all to take a look at some of their very interesting comments. We'd also like to thank Facebook for their very constructive comments. I hope we have responded appropriately, and so keep the comments coming because we are enjoying them.
Right, so why should this meeting adopt the RPC Charter as an output of the Internet Governance Forum? We have 6 reasons for you. So it has been the source for national political processes, for example, in Asia Pacific and New Zealand as a case study, and through the Internet Rights and Freedom Bill in New Zealand, which was led by the Green Party. The second reason, in its use for outreach and education on the ground all around the world. For example, it has been used in the Middle East and North African region at universities, in classrooms in Latin America, Europe, the US, and Asia Pacific. Its comprehensiveness and authority is based in existing human rights law, has had a recognized impact on multilateral and multi-stakeholder undertakings for human rights-based internet governance. Example, the UN Human Rights Council and Net Mondial, which took place in Sao Paulo in 2014. The RPC Charter has been implemented as a coherent and authoritative framework for national initiatives in Italy and adopted by the Italian Parliament in July 2015. Finally, its 21 articles have played an agenda-setting role for internet governance processes, for example, as a source of report from Common Cross-Community Working Party on ICANN's corporate and social responsibility to respect human rights. It was presented in ICANN 53 in June 2015.
Right, we have 10 seconds. We have just currently been granted observer status at the Council of Europe's Steering Committee on Media and Information Society. So just to sum up, as we know, we believe we have here an effective and working document, and we invite you to support us in this continuing work. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both, and it's great to hear about the achievements of the Charter. Our final speaker, we only have one left, no mystery there, will be Dynamic Coalition on Accessibility and Disability with Andrea Sachs from the ITU.
Thank you very much. Let me clear something up. I work as a volunteer for the ITU. I'm actually an independent soul, and I also work with my colleague, Francesca Cesa Bianchi from G3 ICT for Global Inclusive, I never say it right. Just say it quick.
Global Initiative for Inclusive Technologies.
Okay, and she's my scribe because I am a person with disabilities and you wouldn't know it. I'm dyslexic and I have age-related disabilities. You've all seen me dancing around with my cane. We decided to do something practical because there is a saying called, nothing about us without us. Now, if you are a person with a disability and you can't get here, or when you get here you can't get in, or you can't understand what's going on, how in the heck can you participate? So, though we deal with internet governance, though we deal with getting online and all that kind of stuff, we realized that we really needed to deal with accessible meetings. So we created, and we kind of crystallized it last year, a guideline. And we were hoping to get it accepted as an output document last year. I'll just hold it up. You can't really see it very well, but it does say DICAD Accessibility Guidelines, and last year's was 2014. Well, this is now updated, and it's 2015. And we include in our group persons with disabilities, and we do it with captioned telephone calls, because we all live all over the globe in different time zones. Now, in the introduction of this, the internet, I'm just going to read this to you, because I think I want to quote this properly. The Internet Governance Forum's Dynamic Coalition on Accessibility and Disability, and we call ourselves DICAD, would like to provide the following guidelines to the IGF Secretariat on how to improve accessibility at IGF meetings and to eliminate barriers. The intention is to help the IGF Secretariat to improve accessibility for persons with disabilities and to include persons with disabilities with age-related disabilities during IGF meetings. And this is where we get really dangerous, since we are a dynamic coalition who wants to influence the IGF. This requires the staff of the IGF to understand certain procedures and include those requirements as mandatory in all hosts' agreements. Now that's going out on a limb, everyone, but this is really necessary. We made this with a simple, it's not very long, and we have references to make it more complicated if you need to find out specific information. But and it is already posted on the IGF website because we did update it. We took in all the comments that were put on and added them. We had our dynamic coalition meeting and added what we thought we were missing. And this document really should become a living document. It's online. We'll add to it as we find out more, as people add to it and say, well, we forgot this, or we didn't do this that we did last year, because sometimes we forget what we learned. And if there is staff changes, consistency in education is sometimes lost. And though we did something really well one year, we forgot to do it this year. So we thought we have to have something written down that everybody can use. Now, it's not a perfect document, but it's a small document that could be used by many, many people. And you haven't lived, and one of my colleagues is sitting there, we used to meet in the kitchen elevators with the tomatoes to try and get somewhere. And it's not funny if you're in with stinky tomatoes. And it's also funny in a way if you can laugh at it. But stairs are our obstacles. Now, you all are familiar with captioning now. And IGF really was fabulous, and Marcus Coomer really got behind it, and they were the early group to really use captioning on a full-time basis. We couldn't live without it. But there's more. Sign language interpretation, and there is one here, but the young lady was in the dark. Who could see her? And it was only one sign language, which is okay. But we have every sign language, for instance, in every country is different. And there is something called international sign, but there is no international sign language. But the big problem is getting people here. And we need to have a greater population of persons with disabilities, and we haven't really dealt with that, and we are working on that idea of getting funding and fellowships. But we thought we can't have them come here if they can't access. So what we wanted to do was to kind of make something that was tangible, that was usable, that would be accepted by the entire IGF as a Bible, if you like, or the Koran, or whatever book is your book, that we could really, really use to help make it more hospitable and to help the host. Because the host may have people, and by the way, Brazil is great. These volunteer kids who have come here to help us. I have had my bag carried from Timbuktu to China. People have been wonderful. They are really trying to make things accessible for people. But there are some issues with remote participation because many, many people can't come. And we have to have a consistent plan to make it possible for them to use tools when the tools themselves for remote participation are not accessible. And there isn't one tool in the world that's accessible to my satisfaction. So there's lots of work to do. And one of the things I also want to point out is in the back of this document, we have references, you can see that, of other guidelines that are more specific. So, and also this inspired the question 26 of study group 16 of the ITU to actually write, and it has been passed and it's already at the UN now, on accessible remote participation, on guidelines for that, and also remote meetings. And that is, there are 2 technical documents which you can download. So this needs to become a living part of the IGF credo, so we can always have a live, updated guideline on how to get an accessible meeting so we can include persons with disabilities, because nothing about us without us must be the plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think you made a great case for the need for an accessibility and disability Bible, and also to thank the Brazilian hosts for all of their help. So we actually have a little bit of time that we weren't expecting, about 15 minutes, and so we thought we could use this to take information-related questions from the floor. The main discussion and question and debate will be tomorrow morning after everyone's had a chance to sleep on it, fill out the idea rating sheets. But now if there are any initial questions for clarification, we can take them. There are microphones on both sides of the room. And we also encourage you to start completing the idea rating sheets either online or in the back where they're in paper-based form.
Can the people, technical people, put some light on back there, I wonder? Because it's going to be hard to see the sheets otherwise. We'll see if they can.
Are there any questions regarding the presentations that we've heard?
Can I make a suggestion, Jeanette? Which is that if we have time, would it be possible for us to actually give time to people to go to the idea rating sheets and pick them up and sort of things? Because I'm honestly skeptical that after 4 long days of the IGF, that anybody is going to work at night or sort of go online. And honestly, most of us have put in quite a lot of work and would like the feedback.
Yes,
Yeah, I think that if there are no questions for clarification, that is a perfect thing for people to do. So I would endorse that particular suggestion, since I see there is one question for clarification.
Thank you, Avery. Actually, it's not a question for clarification, just a couple of suggestions. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you all very much on the work of the dynamic coalitions, which I think are the living part and the beating heart of the IGF, because a lot of ideas of workshops that we see throughout the day, they come from people involved in the dynamic coalitions. So I think that we cannot say how important they are in words. So thank you very much for the hard work that you have been doing all over the years. And also thanks to the amazing team that has worked and kind of used their brains to try to come up with a solution and a methodology for us to assess the work of the dynamic coalitions. Just a couple of suggestions that I would like to make. I think that this is a very straightforward exercise, and I think that we understand how it works. But in order for the IGF community to be sufficiently informed about how to participate and about the importance of this session, I would like to suggest for the next year that leaflets are produced explaining the methodology of the session and maybe handed in to participants, not only inside the beautiful backpacks that we receive with a lot of information about other things, but also during coffee breaks, and maybe even the dynamic coalitions could have a stand in which the leaflet and also the recommendations that you have made. For us sitting here and listening to you, sometimes the time is short, and for us to kind of digest what you are talking while you are reading the recommendations, it's not very easy. So if the recommendations were kind of put together in a summary and handed in to participants beforehand, that would also be very valuable for participants to think about the recommendations and be more prepared now in the session to fill in the sheets. Another suggestion is to record videos. I think that many of you have made excellent presentations that do not only talk about the recommendations for this particular meeting, but also talk about the work of the dynamic coalitions and give us a broad overview of the importance of the dynamic coalitions and a little bit of their history. So if these videos are recorded and made available maybe a couple of weeks before the IGF, they could also be used to do outreach, so people know that this exercise is going to take place and they have an idea of what to expect in terms of methodology and the recommendations of the dynamic coalitions. But again, thank you very much and congratulations. This is an amazing pilot experience, and I hope that we can repeat it again next year and improve it always. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. We have had a request from the chair who would like to make a quick response.
Very quickly, what Marilia is proposing, which is very interesting and very important, seems to be the formation of a coalition of coalitions, a sort of forum or procedures for us to act together to disseminate the work and so on, which I think is very, very interesting.
Maybe just to add quickly that this is the first year that we've had a main session for dynamic coalitions, and also the first time using the ID rating sheets, and so it's really a pilot, and all of the suggestions are definitely well appreciated, and I think will be taken into consideration in the future. See, we have another question. Please go ahead. Now, and also, if we could please limit it to 90 seconds, timers.
Hard to give us the heads up when the time comes. It's a little far for Avery to walk towards us.
Could you please step closer to the microphone?
The question I have is, as you look at the coffee break and your ability to get to the coffee much more quickly, it's clear that a lot of people have left already by this point, and by tomorrow significantly more will have left. We seem to have a headlong rush to do a tabulation. I would argue that by tomorrow, numbers are not what's important. What's important is feedback on whether people were able to use the form, because numbers are not going to be representative of anything at this point because we don't have people. If this tool is meant to be an input tool to the dynamic coalitions, because I don't think it can be much beyond that, then why don't we leave it open so that after people get home, they can provide input and you can do a running tabulation. because tomorrow's tabulation is a meaningless number that is a futile exercise. What should be is a debrief concept of, hey, was this useful? Did you have something? And I'm guessing I'm at the 90 seconds.
So kind of intersessional idea rating sheet.
Well, essentially, this is two things. It's one, because there are two issues I see with the rating sheet. One is someone came up with an idea, but I have no opportunity to input my idea. And maybe the idea is not representative of what a lot of people want to talk about. So one, we have to figure out what's the workability of that. And then the second thing we have to figure out is what's the utility and how is it going to be used, because I think we have a tool without understanding what we're doing with it. So I think tomorrow, let's maybe do this as an open discussion of, could this be useful? People now see what it is, and they can provide feedback on that. But a concept of tabulation just doesn't make sense, and we seem to be making a headlong rush. You have 15 minutes, it's dark back there, go fill out a dot. That just doesn't seem to be a good path forward.
Yeah, very good points. I think Olivier would like to make a comment.
Yeah, thank you. Joe, just a question. Would a blank rating sheet be a good idea?
I think that would give you then confusion, because then you would not necessarily know how to map anything. I think this is the concept of, if a dynamic coalition has a question saying, is this useful? And at least it's feedback. It's not conclusive feedback in any way, but it's a feedback loop. I think you could have a write-in version where people say, perhaps this is something we would like to discuss, and then that would be a way for dynamic coalitions to see perhaps what's future work we should do, and you can use that as an input methodology.
I could answer about the blank rating sheets idea. The way that this is normally done, you do have blank rating sheets so that people around the room who have their own ideas can also add those and get immediate feedback on them. But we're keeping things simple for this year. As everyone has been saying, it's a pilot, and we haven't put really the resources into what it deserves this year, and we haven't allocated the time. It was something we tried to do. We had to negotiate with the MAG to try and at least split this into 2 sessions so that we had some space in between for people to complete the sheets. Regrettably, the 2 sessions are the last one in the evening and the first one in the morning. So, but everyone's comments are really valuable here, and we're hopefully going to be able to iterate the process next year. At least that's my hope, and we'll be able to do a lot better next time. Thank you.
Thank you. I see we have 2 more questions. Maybe we could, 3 more questions. If you could keep them short, again, 90 seconds, even 1 minute would be better. And I think we should take them in a row, and then we can answer all at once.
Boa tarde a todos. Meu nome é Alderi Santos de Oliveira.
Hello everyone, I am from the city of Rio Grande do Norte, and I would like to know about the aspect about the book. Is this at a virtual access? Should we buy it? I would like to know how we can acquire it. I am working on a forensics specialization for the local university.
I commend you for trying to get feedback. This isn't actually my original question, but the comment about how the form is usually used, if you're actually supposed to fill it in, usually forms are designed for certain kinds of feedback. Usually if it's blank, it's open-ended. And that, usually taking them from one context to another can be quite problematic, because they're generally designed for certain purposes and not for others. The other thing that's interesting to me is I found out for the first time what the sheet looks like and how it's going to be used, and I found out that you're going to use color coding to identify the different groups. I'm hoping, and the question is, are you going to take into account, in the spirit of the IGF, which different groups register in different ways, because the kind of consensus decision making only works if basically all the different stakeholder groups buy into the proposals, and it should be important that it work not just for a head counting exercise, but works for all the constituent multi-stakeholder groups of the IGF.
So, hi, I'm Andrea. I'm from Youth IGF and from the Observatory of the Youth in Latin America, and we've been we at the Youth will be seeing the dynamic coalition the possibility to express part of our claims here in the IGF, specifically the question about the participation of the youth. and we've been asking all the places. So about the question to open spaces for the participation of the youngers. That's the first point. I was talking yesterday with Marianne and with the Avri Dario. And the second point is the possibility to open the IGF to start this in the dynamic coalition with the real horizontal dialogue. Ending, first of all, with that room structure, with that youth thing and the audience we have in the room, because I know it's a hard wish, but that's not a horizontal dialogue. We have a section, and in one of the workshops we did have a talk with the audience,